Hello, today. Do you like my flowers behind me? My really good friend Dana gave those to me to celebrate 12 years of recovery from alcohol addiction and just a special gift. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit or share a little bit about ways where that you can deal with the trauma symptoms or the complex PTSD symptoms that you may experience when you get out or exit a relationship with um, a cluster B personality disordered individual, or somebody who's just very narcissistic. It could be a psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, an active addict, sometimes active addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction, alcohol addiction can look a lot like narcissism, and there's often a comorbidity with those disorders. Very common for narcissists to also be sex addicts, or have a secret hidden sex life, or some other substance addiction. But again, addicts can act very narcissistic, and then sometimes when they get clean and sober, they do the 12-step recovery work, you find that they find that they're not really very narcissistic at all. In fact, they sometimes tend to be more of the codependent types. So just a few things that you can do. So when you first get out of these relationships, I'm going to speak a little bit about my personal experience. When I first found out that the qualifier, who I believe was a covert narcissist, was probably comorbidity of sex addiction or porn addiction, maybe also alcohol addiction. But when I found out that this person had a double life, was having a long-term affair with a married person at work with little children, it was shocking to me. I couldn't reconcile it with the person that I thought he was. Not just the affair, but the callousness of splitting up a family with little children. It did not jive with who I thought this person was and the level of integrity and sort of conscience that I thought this person possessed. But then again, if you're in my case, I believe I was dealing with somebody who for a decade was able to sort of dupe me and come across as a very sort of shy, vulnerable, sensitive individual. So it didn't make sense to me. I've since, after filing for divorce a year ago, I've since seen the behaviors that this person's exhibiting are textbook for covert narcissism. Won't let the relationship end, won't let the divorce end, won't negotiate, won't compromise, very self-centered, lacking in empathy. My brother passed away a couple of months ago of a drug overdose. I found my brother, I found his body. It was very traumatic. My qualifier had spent a decade with my brother. There was no reaching out for any sort of condolences. I can understand him not reaching out to me because I have enforced no contact, but there was no condolences passed on via his family, no condolences whatsoever about my brother's passing. In fact, a few weeks after my brother died, I received documentation from his attorney, accusing me of fraud and hiding money and just all sorts of things that were patently absurd. And my attorney was able to counteract them and prove them incorrect in a very pretty efficient way. But just the fact that that's what I received a couple of weeks after my brother passed away, it's sort of like that whole thing about kicking someone when they're down, and that is something that normal people typically don't do, but narcissists definitely do. It's like a strategy for them. But anyway, you get back to the point at hand, which is when you first come to terms with this. I didn't know that I was with a narcissist. I didn't know anything about narcissism other than I thought it just meant you were a really selfish person. I sort of looked at overt narcissists. I could sort of recognize perhaps who they are, but I didn't have any context for understanding covert narcissism. So I did my research, and once I did it, I was able to really understand, perhaps what I think I was dealing with. It's been very helpful for me to educate myself on cluster B and narcissism, because now I understand why the person is doing what they're doing. It's not personal. It's nothing to do with me. They have a really crazy level of self-centeredness, entitlement, very low or lack of empathy for others. The scorched earth policy in relationships is just totally fine with them. So when I got out, I was in this state of so severe trauma and shock, and not understanding what was happening and not being able to cope, and it was very, very difficult. So what would happen was I would get triggered and my mind would just race, and I would have like obsessive compulsive thoughts. Very common. You may have feelings of anger, rage, revenge fantasies. These are all textbook when you're coming out of these relationships. It's obviously just don't act on them, but it's very normal for you to be having those feelings and those thoughts, and then to say, oh my gosh, am I the narcissist? And if you're asking yourself that, then most likely you're not. Most people, narcissists, one of the problems with the disorder is they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They don't recognize that they're broken. We're all broken. All 7 billion of us on this planet are broken in some way. It's just most of us realize that we're broken, and we try to work on those pieces of ourselves that are broken. But one of the problems with the disorder is this sort of lack of introspection or ability to recognize their brokenness, or that there's anything wrong. They must be perfect. Remember, because there's this whole thing about perfectionism. They must be perfect. And unfortunately, I think internally they either grew up in homes, or whatever the message they got was that they had to be perfect in order to win approval, which is not unconditional love, obviously. So it's all about performing perfection so that they can get flattery, approval, and adulation. So it's a really tough thing when you don't recognize that you have a problem. Psychologists joke that they don't know how to treat narcissists because they never go to therapy, so they don't know much about them. It's kind of a joke, but obviously there is treatment for narcissism if you are one of the brave souls and you are a narcissist and you're going to get help for it. Well, I applaud you. Good for you if you are. You're one of the rare breed. There are a few self-aware narcissists on the internet. I think you've done a really good job of taking their narcissism, educating themselves, and actually educating others. I really like Sam Vaknin because he does that. He's a self-aware narcissist, I think, maybe even a psychopath, and he has done all sorts of work to help others to recover from narcissistic abuse. And I think that in and of itself shows an incredible willingness to improve himself and help others there, and that is going to internally help him to become a better person. When you get out of these, you may be in just some serious state of trauma. And, one thing you can do is remember, you've got the trauma brain, and the trauma brain is going to be like fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the typical responses. And there's ways when you're in that moment, in that state of trigger, and you get triggered and you're in trauma, some really simple things that you can do to help yourself. One thing is to do some deep breathing, like 6 deep breaths from the diaphragm. What you're trying to do is get back into the sort of the parasympathetic response, which is to calm that fight or flight response and the sort of survival mechanism that's happening in your brain without your control. Calm that down. So deep breathing. So deep breathing from the diaphragm. Other things you can do is mantras. I will no longer go to someone for empathy who has none. I will self-nurture. I will love myself. I am worthy. I am worthy of love. You can surround yourself with calming, peaceful music. You can do meditation. There's some really good guided meditations for trauma and overcoming complex or PTSD. Some other things you can do, obviously, that I've talked about is you can go see a therapist. There's EMDR is very helpful. You can also do, I did TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's very helpful for PTSD and depression. I'm very careful about medication. Some people choose to go on antidepressants. I haven't, just because I'm in recovery from alcohol addiction, and I'm very careful about what sort of things I put in my body. Although obviously SSRIs are not an issue if you're an addict. It's fine to take those as far as I understand. But so you can do some really deep breathing, some yoga is very helpful. Restorative, trauma-based yoga is so good for recovery. Also, I go to 12-step recovery meetings. I've been going to Codependence Anonymous, which I find very helpful, as well as Al-Anon. You know, you may or may not label yourself as a codependent. You don't have to actually go to the meetings and to get a lot of good resources from them. You know, I'm still sort of, you know, I believe that I am a codependent, but other people in the meetings identify, instead of saying, you know, hi, I'm Kat, or I'm a codependent, they say, hi, I'm Kat, and I am here because I want to have healthy and loving relationships with others. And they don't necessarily need to put the label of codependence on them. So I don't know. Again, all I'm trying to do here is to share my experience, strength, and hope, so that in the hopes that I can help some of you recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And it is, I understand your trauma, I understand your pain, I've been through it myself. I can tell you that I'm coming out of it. There is healing for you on the other side. There is a beautiful life for you on the other side. There are amazing relationships that are possible for you. Once you do the work and heal, you don't ever have to find yourself in a manipulative relationship again. So I hope you have a beautiful day and enjoy the sunshine or rain or snow or whatever you have where you are right now. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.